This book is everything that is wrong with publishing right now at this very moment. Hi, my name is Mina. Welcome to my channel, Mina Reads. Today we are going to be doing my July/August wrap up. Alright, so before we dive into the video, I do just want to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Book of the Month. Book of the Month is an online subscription service for readers. Their team vets hundreds of books and provides you with a carefully curated selection of new and early release fiction titles so you can spend more time reading and less time researching. Book of the Month also has the best prices in the game for hardcover fictions. I absolutely love them. I think they're a really great way to discover new books, discover new to you authors, explore different genres. Like whatever it is that you're into, whatever your tastes are, I feel like Book of the Month has something for you. Whether it's historical fiction, whether it's mysteries, whether it's literary fiction, sometimes they got romances. They got it all. So you should check them out with a link in my description. My code is Mina Reads and you can get your first box for $9.99. For me personally, I ended up getting Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Raybourn and Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen, and this one is kind of a more hard-hitting mystery with some magical realism elements about a woman who goes to the apartment of her deceased mother and she moves in. She has some enigmatic neighbors. There's some kind of, you know, creepy vibes going on, and she ends up wrapped up in a mystery involving one of her neighbors there. And then we have Killers of a Certain Age, which is about these women who are assassins of a certain age. They're in their 60s and they're about at retirement age, and so they want to retire but they can't. Assassination doesn't really seem like the kind of job that you get a 401k for, so it'll be interesting to see how retirement goes for these ladies. I'm really excited to check this book out, and yeah, so check Book of the Month out in the link in my description below. Use the code Mina Reads to get your first box for $9.99, and let's get into the rest of the video. We started out July really strong with a nonfiction book called The Sellout, and this is by music journalist Dan Ozzi, and it's essentially a story about the punk, emo, post-hardcore like music genre and all of the bands that really popped up during the late 90s, early 2000s, and how there was kind of this like feeding frenzy by major music labels to create the next Nirvana, how they went about like plucking all of these mildly obscure like rock bands out from their respective underground scenes and push them into the mainstream. It's very interestingly structured in that it tells you a lot about the early days of these bands and like them getting together, some of the history behind like their albums and their writing process and their getting together process, but also so like a lot of stuff on the interpersonal side, but also a lot of business things and like them getting their first manager, their first label, how the labels did them wrong, did them good. You know, it talks about a lot of different stuff like that, and I am just a huge music nerd, and I especially loved like the emo post-hardcore rock scene, so I was eating it up. I was living my best life. This features a lot of different bands, so some of them you may have heard of. It's about a lot of different bands. They cover a lot of ground, so many years, but it's all condensed in a really concise and entertaining kind of story. I also think that Dan Ozzi, he just has a very entertaining like writing style. I think that he's a very engaging nonfiction writer, so I have every intention of reading another book that was like co-authored by him, and it is Laura Jane Grace, the front person for Against Me. Laura Jane Grace has a memoir, and he co-wrote that with her, so I will be reading that. I'm gonna put it up on the screen here. I'm gonna be reading that soon because this was just so good, and I did learn more about Laura Jane Grace from reading this because Against Me does have their own chapters in this book as well, and yeah, it was just really great. Then I read some comics, so I read Chainsaw Man Volume 1, and I absolutely hated it. I hated it so bad, you guys. I understand that Chainsaw Man is such a well-regarded manga, but I hated it. Like, I thought that I was gonna enjoy it because the main character, I think his name is Denji. He has gone through a lot of stuff. He has been severely mistreated his entire life, and basically he gets this opportunity to work for this like monster demon hunting agency or whatever, but it's kind of like either he works for them or they kill him. So he's in this like dire straits. Things are not that great, but it's better than his previous circumstances. He's actually getting access to like food and other necessities that he never had access to before. And so I felt like this was going to be the kind of story where it was going to be really interesting on a world building level, but also like on a character level. I thought that Denji was going to be so interesting and so nuanced, and literally the only thing that he's ever thinking about is titties and if he's going to get to fuck on something, and I hated that. Like I cannot read a book where that's all that the character's thinking about ever. And I'm saying that as somebody who reads smut with some of the horniest fictional characters alive. But I cannot with Denji's internal monologue. It just irritating the absolute shit out of me, and I can't do it. I can't imagine doing it for like multiple volumes, reading him talk about like, oh my god, is she gonna let me hug her? Like, look at her tits. I want to hug her. I want to be against her and her big bountiful breasts. Like, bitch, I can't, I won't. So I shan't. Read volume 5 of Spy Family. I think I read this in a vlog, and I remember not loving it. Yeah, I remember not loving it that much. I think that it was like a little bit boring because it was kind of a filler episode, so to say, and it just didn't do a whole lot for me. And it also brought up like a storyline that I don't like, which was kind of involving some like jealousy between two women, and they're like fighting over a man, and it's just like, what if we didn't do that? Like, what if we didn't? I would be so much happier if we didn't. Alright, so then I read Wash Day Diaries by Jamila Rouser and Robin Smith, and this is a comic, and it's like a full color comic. It's really, really beautiful, and it's essentially about these 4 friends and their respective like relationships with their hair, but it talks about their hair care regimens and stuff like that in the confines of like their day-to-day life. So we get to see things about like their social life, their dating life, where they're at romantically, mental health wise and stuff like that, and how all of these different moments and relationships and things like that are all interconnected in their experience with their hair. And it's just a really nice, sweet comic, and I definitely will keep my eye out for whatever these 2 collaborators have coming out next, because this was really incredible, and it's also really beautiful. So if you're just into it for the art, like, the art is fantastic. I was gonna show you this one panel, but they were like having spicy times, but like, it's just really pretty. Like, look at it, look at the colors, like, it's just nice. I would recommend it. Hopefully the lighting's gonna fix. Yeah. Alright, so then I read The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, and this is by Megan Bannon, and this is a new like fantasy romance, and I have to tell you that this is going to be really harsh, so you know, don't be too upset about this if you love this book and you read it and it was amazing to you. But to me, this book is everything that is wrong with publishing right now at this very moment. I know that you have to have seen the many conversations that people have about the tropification of publishing and how so many books are built around tropes rather than being built around a real story and around good character arcs and relationship development and whatever. And this is definitely one of those. This is like a huge example of that for me personally. So I ended up really disliking this, even though it had like a few good moments. I was having fun with it at some times, but it just was not very good. It was not very well structured, not very well developed, especially for being like hundreds of pages long. It's like 400 pages. It looks a bit thicker than it really is, but it's like 400 pages, and I still felt like it wasn't well developed at all. And somehow in a 400-page narrative, the relationship ended up being rushed. So this is an enemies to lovers story, and so it's about these 2 people. This girl, she works as like a mortician, and she works at this like undertaking place, and he is basically like this bounty hunter type person in their fantasy world. Zombies kind of like roam the land, and these bounty hunters have to kill them and like bring their corpses to the mortician so that the mortician can, like, you know, give them their funerary rites or whatever. And basically they have beef kind of for no reason, and it's just stupid. So I hate that personally, as like someone who is just not too big into like hate to love or like enemies to lovers. I feel like the reason that they don't like each other in this is just plain fucking stupid. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then like they have all this animosity towards each other, so I feel like the author put enemies to lovers in there, hate to love in there, because it's a good popular trope that everybody eats up and they love it so much. Then they also included this other trope where it's like the characters are like pen pals, or they're interacting anonymously, and they're like really in love with each other and like each other and are enamored by each other in this anonymous setting, but then in real life they hate each other. That's another trope that I've seen popping up time and time again in books nowadays. I don't know why. It's a fun trope. it can be a fun trope. I even enjoy the trope, but I don't think it was done well in here to any particular effect. And then it has, look at this on the back. This is a whole list of the tropes. So it's enemies to lovers, opposites attract, slow burn, grumpy sunshine, inconvenient attraction, belligerent sexual attention, forced proximity. It's about the yearning, earn your happy ending, sexy pen pals, blah blah blah. And it's just like this is the issue. The issue is that the author wrote down all of these, in my opinion, the author wrote down all of these tropes, all these little things that they wanted to put into the book, and then they just went with that. They didn't think about, ooh, how should I develop this? How should I make the characters make some fucking sense? How should I make their relationship make sense? And it just never does. And like, okay, you want to do the enemies to lovers thing, and then they're just no longer enemies. Like one like maybe halfway into the book, right? Like let's say a good 250 pages into the book, like here, they were still like hating each other, and then something happens, and it's like an incident that happens for like maybe 2 pages, and the next thing you know, they're fucking, and then they're dating, like, and in love with each other. It doesn't make any sense. Like it's slow burn in the fact that they don't interact in any real way, and they don't have any type of relationship development besides these very blank and, like, I was gonna say meaningless, but like there's no depth to like the letters that they write to each other, and the letters are supposed to be the thing that like builds their emotional connection and that makes you feel like they're a developed relationship, but they really aren't. Like, it's just not. Listen, for me personally, I feel like this book had a lot of really interesting ideas and a lot of interesting vibes, and it just didn't really succeed at being any of those things. I think the best aspect of the story actually was kind of like the world building. The world building was sort of interesting because, like I said, this is a fantasy romance and it's set in this, you know, like world where there's gods and zombies and all this type of shit going on. So I feel like the world building aspect was kind of interesting. There was also like some talking animals. The talking animals were fun, but it just was like, it just wasn't a good romance to me. I'm sorry. It just, no. All right. But speaking of fantasy romance, I did read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, and this was so good. It was incredible, actually. Not necessarily like a new favorite, but it was so good. I think I would give it closer to like a 4-star than a 5-star, but it was really good. So this is like a Regency fantasy romance, and we're following this character. I can't remember what her name is now. Okay, Dora. So we're following this character named Dora, and Dora, her soul has been cut in half by this fairy, and so he has kind of the emotional half of her, and then she has the very like rational, calm side of herself. And so because of this, she kind of struggles in social settings that require more like big emotional responses, and people see her as sort of strange and off-putting. So this is causing her some, you know, trouble on the marriage market, and it's also causing her beloved cousin some trouble on the marriage market because they come sort of as a package deal, and Dora is just a bit socially awkward, so to say. So Dora ends up meeting this guy named Elias, and Elias is like the high magician for the king or whatever, and she ends up meeting him in like this shop one day, and they have, I don't want to say they have like hate to love, but they have like this mild animosity just because Elias is kind of a dickhead, and they banter and they beef with each other a little bit, but for the most part they have a lot of like mutual respect for each other, and they just kind of like poking fun at the other, and so they have this really wonderful relationship building between them. But there's also some stuff going on where Elias, as the high magician, he is investigating like this magical disease that's sweeping the country, and so Dora kind of helps him figure out what's going on with the magical disease, as well as their relationship develops from there, and it's just really good. I think that if you're someone who enjoyed The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, I think that this is a book you could really end up enjoying, just because it's similar, you know, it's like Regency fantasy, so we have that like that historical romance vibe, but also some fantastical cozy elements to it, and it was just really cool, and I liked it a whole lot. I think I ended up reading this second book in August, but I'll talk about it now because who cares. So it was 10,000 Stitches, also by Olivia Atwater, and this is an interconnected standalone, so I wouldn't say you have to read Half a Soul if you don't want to, but this is so this is about this character named Effie, and she is a maid in this, you know, really strict household. Really, you know, things are not going too great. She ends up meeting this guy, and she's in love with him. The only problem is that he's a lord and she's just a maid, and so there's never going to be, you know, a way for them to meet and fall in love and socialize with each other, and she wants to get married. So she ends up meeting this guy named Lord Blackthorn, and he is a fairy, and he decides that he wants to kind of be like her fairy godfather and make her dreams come true. So he's trying to help her woo this you know, gentleman, but things are going awry because, okay, so my camera sort of died, so if the angle's different, that's why. But anyway, so Lord Blackthorn, he is Effie's new fairy godfather. He's trying to help her woo this man, but things are going awry because Lord Blackthorn really does not understand human customs, and so there's lots of like hijinks that ensue in trying to create this perfect love story for Effie, and it's just really fun and little ridiculous, and I love the relationship that develops in here. And so it was just also really good, really fun, really entertaining, and I think that I am a huge fan of this new, or at least new to me, thing that's cropping up with these like cozy fantasies. I just think that they're so fun, so sweet and whimsical, and I absolutely love them. So shout out to Olivia Atwater for really like driving home for me that cozy fantasy is something that I need to be searching for because I love it so much. Okay, then I read this romance called A Deal with the Devil by, I believe her name is Elizabeth O'Rourke, and I can't remember the names of these characters, but also I didn't really like this book all that much. It's a romance about this girl who becomes like this guy's assistant, and he's like a really famous celebrity plastic surgeon. Honestly, the fact that he's like a popular plastic surgeon, the only thing I could think about is him being like Dr. Miami, and like I follow Dr. Miami on TikTok just because he's fucking funny. Like his TikTok account is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So all I could think about is him being Dr. Miami, and I just really couldn't take him seriously as like this like hunky, super sexy British babe. Like it just wasn't working for me. And then the girl who is his assistant, I don't know, they have like this little like playful banter, hate to love thing. I can't say that I hated this book. I do think that it is like well written, it's well structured, they have like good chemistry and banter together, but it's just not a story that I absolutely loved, and there were lots of little things about it that just like irritated my spirit and didn't make me a huge fan of either character individually. But I do think that like as a union they made sense. So if you're interested in like the boss employee trope, the kind of like hate to love grumpy boss thing, like if that's something that does it for you, you might really enjoy this one. It's pretty fun, pretty decent, but not my favorite. I read a monster romance in July. It was called Inextricably Tied, and it's about this girl who is like a banshee. She is in this kind of situationship with her partner. They're like private investigators, and so like he's her partner, and he's a gargoyle, and he's like big and huge and giant, and you know, and then there's another person that gets introduced to their relationship, and he's a night terror. And so this is like a story where they're on a road trip trying to solve a crime together, and also lots of spice is going on, and the spice was spicing. It was spicing to a degree that I have never tasted before. It was just like some of the stuff that they were doing in there, I was shocked. I was flabbergasted even. It was not that it was like so shockingly dirty, depraved or anything like that, but it was just like the creativity involved in even thinking of and conceptualizing of some of the shit that they were doing in there. I was like, Aveda Vice's mind. Like she was thinking on levels I couldn't even imagine. So shout out to her. That was a good time. If you're a monster romance girly, I would definitely recommend it. It was a good time. Also, you should read the prequel novella. It's called Skin. You should read that one first for just some context. And finally, in July, I read The Death of Vivek Oji, and I have a vlog where I talk about this, so I would recommend you checking out the vlog where I talk about it, just because, why not? Shamelessly plugging my own content. I also think it's a pretty good vlog, and I feel like I probably talk about it in a much more detailed and nuanced way in there while the thoughts were still fresh than I will, like, almost 3 months after the fact. But basically, why is the bookmark still in here? Christ. Okay, so The Death of Vivek Oji is about this character, Vivek Oji, but it is a story that's told not from his point of view. It's from the point of view of some people who were close to him, his cousin Osita and his mother Kaveta, and a few other POVs get brought in sometimes, and it basically talks about, you guessed it, the death of Vivek Oji, because in the narrative we find out that Vivek has died a rather brutal death, and so the story is kind of, it goes backward into the past to talk about Vivek's childhood and early adulthood, and then, you know, all of the events and emotions that lead up to the day and the days after he passes away. But I can't say that this was a book that I really enjoyed. It was maybe a case of like, it's not you, it's me. I do actually think it is the book. Like, I do think it is the book, but I also think that it's me. And the me that I brought to this reading experience was not prepared to appreciate whatever it is that the author was attempting to do with this one. So I didn't like it. But that is everything that we read for July. So moving into August, I will start us off with a really good one, which was also by Akwaeke Emezi. And so this is Freshwater, and Freshwater is a narrative about this character named Ada, but we don't really get much of Ada's perspective because Ada is living with these spirits inside of her, and they are controlling her actions and thoughts and everything like that. And this is really a story about mental health and about self-destruction, and this self-destruction is aided by these voices in her head. And so we get the perspective of the voices rather than the perspective of Ada, and so it's interesting to see Ada's life playing out while these voices kind of influence her in all of the wrong directions in life, kind of. And it's just a very hard-hitting for me. I feel like this one hit much harder. I was way more emotional reading this one, and I felt more just honestly astonished by all of the things that I feel that the author achieves with this. I think this book is just incredible. It's just so well written, so well executed, and completely unlike anything that I have ever read before. And I actually think that, and I just think that this book was a much better representation of the concept that I feel like Akwaeke was attempting with Vivek Oji, with like the kind of outsider perspective on an inside experience of somebody's life. I think that they did it much better in Freshwater than they did it in The Death of Vivek Oji. But that's just me personally. So this one was great. I would highly recommend this one. Then, because I read Freshwater for a video, I read it for like this reading outside of my comfort zone video. And in that video, I was reading literary fiction. So I ended up picking Emily St. John Mandel. And this is Sea of Tranquility. It's like a time travel narrative. It follows a bunch of different periods in time. And there is this like glitch or something where all of these timelines are collapsing in this singular moment, and that moment is being investigated by this like time traveling agent named Gaspari Roberts. And yeah, I think that the concept was a little bit more interesting than the execution ended up being for me, and I just found this book to be a little bit of a slog. It took me like weeks to finish it, so it wasn't my favorite reading experience. I definitely understand why people like it. I definitely see why Emily St. John is popular, but just wasn't my cup of tea personally. I hate the floor right here because it's like very creaky and annoying, so I don't know why I sat here. Then we've got On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, the final book that I read for that video, and this is a story about a character named Little Dog who is writing a kind of like, I don't want to say a memoir, but he's writing this letter to his mother, and the letter details a bunch of different moments, very sporadic throughout his life, that he feels are really important and he wants to share with her. And it's a really incredible book. I think you should also watch my video on it because I don't think that I'm going to do it justice. It's been some time since I read it, but it was just really incredible thematically. And something that I remember saying in that video is that I really like the fact that this story is kind of a love letter to his mom, but also an indictment of her and the way that her choices while raising him, the way that they have like negative impacts on him, but also show that he really understands a lot of the sacrifices and the hard work and the effort that she put into loving and caring for him, and some of the ways that that love and care did not resonate properly for him throughout his life, which I think was really incredibly well done, one of my favorite aspects of the story. And I will also say that it's just incredibly well written. I think if you're a poetry type person, you're gonna love this. But if you're not a poetry type person, if you don't like really flowery writing that sometimes feels a little aimless and like it's not necessarily going anywhere in particular, then you might not end up enjoying this. But I had an amazing time with it, and I would definitely recommend it, and it deserves all of the hype and all of the praise that it has thus far, in my opinion. Then we have another hyped book that I think deserves all of the praise that I have ever seen for it, which is This Is How You Lose the Time War. And I did this really fun little like reading experiment thing, sort of kind of, where I did a live stream with my bestie, Miriam from Miriam Reads Sometimes. Well, actually her channel is not called that anymore. It's called just Miriam with like 3 R's, I think. I'll leave her link in the description. But we did a live show together where we were both reading this, and I was challenging myself to keep the live stream going until I finished the book. And yeah, so anybody who partook in that particular live stream, thank you so much for joining me and for kind of cheering me on and reading with me. That was a really fun reading experience, and I hope to do something like that again on my channel soon because it was really fun. I liked it. And basically I read this in the one sitting, and it was so incredible. And this is another time travel narrative, and it's basically about these 2 characters, Red and Blue, and they work for 2 rivaling time travel agencies. Well, not time travel agencies, but 2 rivaling agencies that are attempting to make their respective futures possible. And so to do that, they deploy agents to change and tweak little moments in human history to make sure that everything's on the right path for their particular futures to occur. So this is a story that is about that, but it's also a love story between the 2 characters, and this was so incredible. But I know for a fact that I have attempted to read this book so many times prior to that live stream, and I just could not get past like the first 10 pages. Every time I ended up DNFing it, stopping it, putting it on pause, but something just really clicked with this particular reading experience, and I just absolutely loved it. 5 stars. So I really think that this is one of those books where you need to be in the right mental headspace to read it and appreciate it. You really need to go with the flow. It's not going to make sense, and so I think that you just need to go with the vibes. Go with the vibes that are happening. Don't try to make too much sense of it, and just appreciate like the words and the prettiness and the vibes between the 2 characters. I think that that's the best you can really do, because it is so like the authors are thinking on levels that a lot of us would never achieve. So I think that you shouldn't go into it trying to make sense of everything that's going on, particularly regarding the time travel and the timelines and all that, because that'll just confuse the fuck out of you. So don't do that. Read this more so for the vibes and for the sapphics, and get your life. Alright, so the last physical book that I have is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This has been on my TBR for a million years. I finally got around to it, and it was good. I definitely think it met the hype, and I understand why it is so popular. So this is a family drama about the Riva siblings. The Riva siblings are the children of Mick Riva, who in the Taylor Jenkins Reid cinematic universe is kind of like this huge rock star. And so he is basically a deadbeat dad, and this is kind of about their family history and also their family present, and it all is set to the backdrop of this annual party that the Riva siblings have at their household. It just was really entertaining to read. I also think that it was a good story. I think a lot of people who are obsessed with those like stories about the trials of being like the eldest sibling and like having to step up and be a parent to your younger siblings, I think if you're a person who enjoys those kind of stories, you will really resonate with this story in particular and with the character Nina. But yeah, I thought this was really good. So if you're looking for a family drama to read, I would recommend it. So then I did read some comics and stuff in August. So I read Saga volume 3 and 4. Saga is this really amazing like space opera comic book series. So this is a really fun series. It's also really emotional. I enjoy it quite a bit, and like I said, I read volumes 3 and 4, hoping to read the subsequent volumes soon, but I have them all on hold for my library, and the hold list is really long, so who knows when I'll get around to continuing. But it is a really incredible series. Loved it a whole bunch. Then I read volume 6 of Spy Family, and I really enjoyed volume 6 a lot better than volume 5. I just think that volume 6 was just a fun time, and it dealt with some stuff that I enjoy personally, which is when we get to see the missions that Lloyd is on, because Lloyd is like this spy, obviously, as the title would suggest. And so I like seeing Lloyd's missions and the stuff that he's doing for his work. I think that that's the aspect of the story that intrigues me the most, like his missions and then the way that he operates as like a family man. That dichotomy is really fun and exciting to me personally. So I had a lot of fun reading this volume because we got lots of mission details and it was a fun mission, so I enjoyed it. I also read 2 romances that were on the shorter side. I read Just for Tonight by Rousey Adams, and this is not even a full romance. It's a novelette maybe. It's really short. It's only about 30-40 pages, but it's essentially about these people who are on vacation with their friends. Their friends are having like a destination wedding, and so they are there for the wedding, and sparks are kind of flying between them, and so this is just like a one-night stand between them. But I believe that Rousey is soon coming out with like a follow-up full-length novel for them, so I can't wait to see what they're up to, because they were a fun couple. They had good chemistry, and the spicy times were definitely spicing, so I'm excited to see, you know, what a full-length romance is going to look like for them. And then I read 2-Minute Warning by Alexandra Warren, and this is a sports romance that I read this month, and it is about these two characters whose names I cannot remember, but the girl, she is a influencer, like an Instagram influencer, and then the guy, he is the quarterback for this football team. They meet at a party. They hit it off pretty quickly. This is a very low angst romance, and it was a good time. Like, I enjoyed it. So I think if you're a sports romance kind of girly, but you want something low angst, low stakes, read this. It was a fun time. So then I read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This is her memoir, and this was incredible. I would highly recommend everybody read this, just because I think that it's a really good and really insightful look into the life of a child star and the way that child stars are put under so much pressure at such a young age, and like what that can do to a young mind and a young person's self-esteem, but also just like the specifics of Jennette's situation with her mother, who was abusive and encouraged a lot of very unhealthy behaviors in her, including disordered eating. And it's like very, you know, a hard-hitting book. So I would say, you know, go into it if you're in the right frame of mind and if you are prepared to deal with some more difficult topics. But it is a very well structured, well written memoir, and it is just really emotional. The last thing that I read this month was The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper, and this is a historical fiction novel, and it is about this woman who is a prostitute at this brothel called The Wolf Den. And so it's about her relationships with her fellow slave prostitutes and their experiences with their master, their experiences just in general with their trade and like how they go about their day-to-day life and their work, but also it's a really interesting look at the ways that like people form community in hard situations, and so there's like a really kind of beautiful but complex bond that grows between the main character, whose name I can't remember, but the main character and all of the other people in the brothel with her, and she was just a very interesting character. Lots of very complex character dynamics at play here. Definitely a hard read, but it was a good one, and I definitely want to read the follow-up novel in this series, so I can't wait to check it out. I think it's coming out maybe in November or December. It's called like The House with the Gold Door or something like that. So yeah, I can't wait to read that. I think it'll be really great. This one was really awesome. It wasn't like my new favorite book of all time, but it was incredibly well written, and I do want to read more historical fiction now. But if you have any historical fiction recommendations for me that are set pre-20th century, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. So yeah, those were all the books that I read in the past 2 or so months. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next one, hopefully. Bye, you guys. Like, comment, and subscribe, and a special thank you to all of my wonderful patrons.